Everyone, welcome back to another episode of Human Design Coffee Talk. We're on at the correct time this time. I swear daylight savings just really messes me up, especially when we schedule these months in advance. Welcome everybody. Kelsey's going to be joining us soon. Welcome. See some friends hopping on. Hey, there's Kelsey. Just waiting for Brandy and Kelsey to hop on and we'll get started. My husband is building guitars behind me, so if there's sound, it is what it is. Thing. Okay.
It's the correct time.
It's the right time. We did it. I did it.
You did it. Welcome everybody. We have Kelsey joining us today, 5'2" Emotional Manifestor with like a lot of definition.
The coolest.
The coolest.
Yeah, Kelsey has a really unique chart. I haven't seen one like that before. I mean, they're all unique.
No, they are, but yeah, I know.
It's just this one, like, when I first saw your chart, Kelsey, I was like, whoa.
Explains a lot.
Yeah, it does. It does, and I'm like, I just enjoy looking at them. I have your chart pulled up, so I'm looking at like the flow of your single definition, and it's like so many channels all flowing together. I'm like, damn.
Yeah, I remember when we first started talking, you were like, oh, I'm excited to talk to another single definition that has a lot of centers defined. And like, yeah, you don't see that very often.
And a motorized throat, like, and it's all coming at ya.
And 3955.
And it's all coming at ya.
2551. I mean, like, come on, channel of initiation. What?
Yeah.
All of it.
Get up.
It's like all of it.
It's a lot to hold.
It is.
I said once, you know, people like to say 3955 is the most annoying channel to be around. And I'm like, imagine always being around it because it's in your aura constantly. Like, we know, we know it's annoying. We know.
I love me some 3955s, and maybe that's just because I have 39 and it's my conscious sun. So like, I love the energy. Like some of my best friends are 3955s. So I love it. Like, yeah, two of my best friends, my mom, like, I love it. I love the energy.
It's interesting because I remember when Amy Lee did my foundation reading, she was like, yeah, have you had the experience where it just seems like there's a lot of provocation happening around you all of the time and you're not always the one doing it? Like, yeah. And it makes sense though, because people are amplifying it. So it's not always us. It's like, it's not us being annoying. It's people not knowing what to do with that frequency and amplifying it. And that was like, I feel like my entire childhood was just, I'm always around all of the provocation.
Yeah. And then as a fifth line undefined ajna, this is like where I am. The most present theme in my current deconditioning is realizing how much of other people's sort of perceptions of me based on that provocative energy were projections, and then how much of that got just lodged in my ajna around opinions. I have my personality sun in the gate of opinions, like other people's sort of opinions of me and how much is stuck in there. That's what I'm currently detoxing.
Wow. Is there an opinion of you that you just do not feel is actually true for you?
You know, it's as I weed through all of these, as I detangle a lot of what's gotten lodged up in there in that ajna. The line between, is this actually this person's opinion, or is this my fear that this is their opinion, gets really blurred, because everything's projection, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I sometimes when I talk about what I don't like that I think people think of me, I have a voice inside going, do people really think this about you? And I don't know. I've had a few challenging relationship fallouts or clarifiers within relationships that are changing in the last couple of years that I've been in my human design experiment, where it has been like, oh yeah, people think this shit about you. But I feel like there's kind of I'm experiencing it as a little bit of a dangerous line where I don't want to perpetuate a self narrative that people think this about me, right? So anyways, that's all the background drama happening in here about that question, but the actual direct answer is just a lot of like manifestor stuff, like that I'm selfish, that I am arrogant, that I don't care about people, which is like always news to me, because inside of my aura, like almost all my energy goes to the G, right? I've got 5720, but other than that, everything else goes through the G. I don't even have manifested channels. So even my anger moves through this place of love. So like everything that comes out of me is truly for the love of humanity and of all people. And so when it comes back to me as though there hasn't been like thought or consideration in regards to my every move, it genuinely confuses me. But then my ajna's like, they must be right. You must be such an asshole.
And that must be hard as a left angle cross as well.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Because it's like
Yeah.
your whole trajectory is, here to be in relationship with the other, to have an impact on the other. And
It's recently I've noticed a distinction where I'll sometimes talk about like receiving projections and wanting to be very careful and thoughtful about how I phrase things in order to try to reduce resistance. Sure, this is informing, right? But also reduce room for error in perception and projection. Not that it matters, right? Often to no avail. But I've had a couple friends point out, like, I'll sometimes think that what I'm about to say is really controversial or really heretical. And I'll have friends with right angles be like, why do you think that's heretical? Why do you think that's controversial? And that was adding doubt to my self-perception and my experience as a fifth line as well. And then something clicked for me recently where I was like, of course, a right angle cross, they're not going to be constantly thinking about how are others receiving this? How does this influence the other? So something shifted for me that helped me to recognize that being a part of my thought process and a significant part of how I make my choices about how I move through the world and how I want to show up and communicate. Sure, there's probably a lot of ajna conditioning still that's still a part of that, but also that is a part of my nature. Underneath those layers and fears, there is still, it makes sense that I'm always going to be considering what's the impact of this, how will this influence people, how will the masses receive this,
Yeah. So we've got manifestor aura, fifth line, second line projections, left angle cross of upheaval. I mean, there's just all of these, all of these things that
super defined ego.
yeah. All of these things where you could be met with a lot of projections in general of how you're moving through the world.
Yeah, and you both were alongside me for a significant part of my foundational human design education, where it was just like every new layer I was just like, okay, looks like some more of that same theme for me. All right, more like piling on these sort of base octave themes of like, you provoke people. People can't handle you. Like, people are not ready for you sometimes, and live your life anyways.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
loved watching you go through that process. I think because you were like finding your voice in a group, it felt like it was like, and I remember you expressing like it feels really good to feel like people are listening and they care and they're, and like I can talk a lot and everybody's all ears. And that's really what it felt like every time you would share. It was like emotional processing and informing. And it just was really cool to watch your process of like unraveling through that.
That brings up a good point, because particularly the experience of holding some of the rare elements in my design, specifically my profile is pretty rare and manifestor, of course, and then showing up in a human design space, it has like brought this added layer of awareness that sometimes translates to fear and nerves that I don't typically have. Like, I'm a teacher, my background's in education. I taught high school, scariest audience to most people, right? I taught high school for 8 years. I teach astrology now. I've taught yoga. I've taught Reiki. Like, I don't have a lot of fear to show up and speak. That's always been, for the most part, pretty easy and organic to me. And it's this interesting, like, double-edged sword thing has been happening as I enter the human design space more, whether it's as a student, which is where I met you both, or I've like taught some fundamental human design stuff as well, where it's like there's more pressure because neutral, like, this is, I don't know, blame or judgment or fault around this, but of course people are going to be like, ooh, what's a manifestor like? What's this 5-2 emotional manifestor like? And it, like, especially as I'm learning about my aura, as I'm learning about the projection field, I'm like, oh God, like, what do people need? What are people needing from this interaction? What are they going to get from this interaction? And it's almost like, so double-edged sword. One is all that stuff. The other piece is knowing that if in a group setting of all people who are really curious about human design and bought into human design, if my energy is repelling, if I do say something provoking, or if I don't say something provoking, but people feel provoked, there is this added layer of comfort where we all know it's not personal, it's mechanics, and so there is this element of safety that I feel on top of that added pressure. There is this element of safety because, for the most part, I might be projecting in my own, like, pure intentions a little bit, but for the most part, I feel like it's very nice to know that people are able to look at their reception, our energetic frequency exchange, the projection field with a level of, like, discernment, and without jumping to quickly judge the way that my energy made them feel or the way I express something. So it's like these two things happening at once, where in some ways it's made me feel actually a lot more careful and cautious, and like, which I think is maybe just part of, this is like why I said maybe let's call the talk Deconditioning as a Spiral, because I think I might just be in a part of my experiment and my deconditioning process right now where I'm really freaking aware of my aura and the projection field, and in some ways it's making it less comfortable to be in my skin.
Yeah.
I'm attuned to it.
I'm really glad you brought this up because it's something that I've felt, but I haven't been able to put into words. And then you just put it into words, and I'm also second line and have a very intense chart. And so it's kind of interesting when you come into the human design space, people are making assumptions about you based on your chart. And so then they ask you like, oh, what's this experience like? And you're like, I don't know. Because it's like, what if it doesn't feel true at this point in time? Or what if that's not how I perceive it? And so I love that you call it a double-edged sword, because that's truly what it feels like. It's like on one hand, you're like, whoa, I actually have this like space to really be myself, but I'm also finding myself within that and getting to know myself. And so I don't know that I'm going to show up the way people are expecting based on my chart.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because it's like within that spiral, within the pendulum swing that is deconditioning / life, my experience was like, at first it was just like, oh yeah, this is all so true. Fuck yeah, this is me. You know, and like at first those worries and fears weren't there because I also come to human design from astrology, and I've been practicing astrology for 7 years. So different, but so much sameness in a way. You know, there's a lot of overlap, and here's an image and a map of frequency that explains your nature and your body and your energy. And so this, I've had, you know, a similar experience entering astrology and having a shared language with someone where I could say, you know, instead of saying emotional manifestor with 6 defined centers, I could say Aries, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Sagittarius, Moon, and Rising, like hella fireball. And it's like a similar thing. So at first it was just like, oh yeah, it's me. And I don't have to worry about articulating it right because it is my energy. And I think human design does support that. But then it's like you start to realize that your initial reception and understanding of what human design teaches us is still loaded with conditioned perceptions. And then you start to go, you know, then it's such a spiral. It's such a mess.
Yeah, especially looking at like, and why is it with human design when there's certain channels that are like, whoa, like emoting, and you got that and struggle, and like there's these channels where it's like money line, whoa, ego, whoa, you know, and
projection.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, all 3 of us have pretty intense charts, you know, and I honestly don't think that we're like that intense of people to like be like, if you're in aura with us, it's, you know, it's like, well, yeah, my chart has big dick energy, but I'm just here witnessing it. I don't know, you know, like, so it's interesting, like when, like, even I know this much about astrology, but I know that I'm like Scorpio rising, and people are like, oh, Scorpio energy, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
Intense.
I don't know. I'm just living.
Like, what does intense even mean? You know, it's kind of like, what are people trying to communicate when they're saying that's really intense? And I do it too. So I'm curious about myself when I say that. Like, what do I mean by intense?
Well,
Right.
and, you know, the thing is, I don't disagree with those statements.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
my astrology chart is mostly fire. And it took, with quite a bit of air as well, which just like fans the flames. And it took me understanding the breakdown of the zodiac and all the parts of it and the elements and what they represented for me to even begin to analyze the fact that not everybody's having this fiery experience that I'm having. Other people are earthy. What must that be like, you know? So that's why I say I don't disagree, like, because I can see it. I can see it in a natal chart. I can see it in a body graph. And so I'm like, yeah, this is a particular flavor to be around, right? And this isn't the experience that everyone is having. And there's something really magical in that. But I think it's just like, there's truth to the way that we label these things, but then there's also so much projection on top of that.
Yeah. Well, everything's a binary too. So it could be the exact opposite.
Right.
You know, in human design.
And I've noticed, I don't know if you guys have had this experience, but there can also be loaded perceptions around something like, let's say if somebody's parent was a 3955 and they have one experience of that energy and they've been conditioned by that specific person's 3955 their whole life, and then they see that you have that on their chart and they're like, oh, this is what that's like. And you're like, actually, that's not been my experience with it. Or I'll even say to people, like, how does my aura feel to you? You know, what do you feel happening in this exchange right now? Because there's so many different flavors to everything. And it's what the mind does. It wants to categorize everything. And that's why human design is helpful in this way. But then we also have to remember our unique experience of it at the same time.
And our responsibility for being the ones that filter what's coming in through our undefined centers, right? Like that's a more recent major theme in my deconditioning that I'm a little past. I was going to say the hump, but a hump of right is what you just said, Teresa, but kind of just more generally speaking to the undefined solar plexus, and like realizing that quite a few of the relationships recent relationships in which I've had the most challenge in the last couple of years have been undefined solar plexus people that now looking back, I'm able to understand that there's a lot of shit lodged in their undefined center that I provoke the fucking hell out of. And I'm really the perfect recipe for someone who, I'm the perfect karmic mirror, right? 5'2", impenetrable aura, manifestor, energy, cross of upheaval, for someone to encounter me and have it be kind of non-negotiable that like your whatever's lodged there, we're gonna poke at it. Because and this is the big part of the transformation I've made, and probably one of the most significant things that the first couple of years in my experiment have brought to me is like this realization of how much I used to apologize for the fact that my energy and my frequency did poke some of that stuff in people and assume that if they were upset, I had done something wrong. And now I'm just, realizing, I have been in the process of realizing that that shit's inevitable. And I think I also made a shift that was really helpful at one point, kind of early on in my deconditioning, where at first, even before I like really understood the mechanics of the body graph, I would look at those 6 defined centers and be like, oh God, like I'm conditioning everyone, and like looking at connection charts. I'm a single def with 8 channels. What is that? Like I bridge everyone, I have dominance channels. And there was the stuff that I had let set in my undefined ajna about all the projections I was receiving my whole life that I didn't know were projections were like, this was just supporting this fear I had that I have this dominating energy that steamrolls everyone. So that was another one of the first kind of like, oh gods of human design. It's like nice to feel seen and also like, it's true. But a shift I made that was really helpful was, I know that I am very intentional and very self-aware and very thoughtful and very committed to now with human design, what I would say is to emitting a clear frequency, right? I would have called it something else before. So now I've been able to kind of shift into a mindset of, wow, there's so many very open people in the world, and I'm friends with a lot of them. And now of course they don't want to be amplifying my energy all the time. Great, I'm a manifestor, I'm a second line. I don't want you to be amplifying my energy all the time either, but when they do, I like, this might sound a little, my 5th line here is like, are people going to think this is really conceited? Maybe. But what I've shifted to think, to feel safer in my big ass energy is how different it must feel for these very open people to receive my clear frequency, even though it's a lot, versus to be receiving distortion everywhere. Not to say that I don't still emit distortion, but as a general rule, I feel my frequency is clear and getting clearer.
Yeah, I'm really glad.
About go.
I was just going to say, I'm really glad that you brought up the centers and the defined centers, because I think so many people, like, we get in our human design journey and we're like, ooh, I have this gate and this channel and this, and I'm this profile and this and this and this. But there's so much to be learned about understanding your centers, whether they're defined or undefined, and just knowing those themes of them and just having the basic awareness of that and how that can impact the other when you're in aura with them. And just from there, seeing what happens, you don't have to be like, oh, that's my this doing that to you. It's like, I'm noticing this theme come up. Oh, that's my ajna. Oh, that's my head. Oh, that's my solar plexus. Just having that awareness. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because so many people, we just want to get like right in it,
Well, yeah. And I also wonder how you feel about the notion that the more we gain awareness, decondition, whatever you want to call it, the less we actually amplify those centers. And it's more just about noticing, oh, I'm feeling this, but I'm not, it's like the mind that's amplifying it.
That's so interesting. I don't think I've heard that notion before.
Oh,
I think I heard Jonah Dempsey say it somewhere. So shout out to Jonah.
So the way I understand the mechanics of it now, which of course is a spiral, so it'll be ever evolving and changing, is that the amplification is just a part of the mechanics, but like the way this is just the way I currently perceive it. So that the amplification as we decondition wouldn't necessarily be lessened. We would just be attached to and focused on and acting on it less or not at all. Right?
Yeah, so maybe it doesn't feel, because at least I'll just speak from my own personal view here, but open ego, amplifying a defined ego, to me, it would feel like I'd get really defensive, puff up my chest, want to come back even harder than they're coming at me, want to push them harder than they're pushing me. So there is this feeling of it getting bigger and bigger and bigger, amplifying. But now it's not that I don't feel the intensity of that and how that feels sometimes, but because my mind isn't saying, oh, you need to prove this. And my mind still does, right? But it's just a matter of like not necessarily always acting on that. It's like because my mind isn't telling me like this, that, and me believing it, it doesn't feel as intense. It's more like, oh, okay, oh, I felt myself getting defensive there. Reel it in a little bit, or reflecting on it later. Oh, I felt myself getting a little defensive, but it wasn't necessarily as big, So that's just something that's kind of been developing within my awareness lately.
I really love this concept, and I'm excited to continue to undefined ajna swim with it, because I think it brings up the question, like, what is this amplification that we keep about? What even is it? Because my understanding up to this point has been like, it's either pressure, awareness, or energy being inside of your own body and your own aura louder in a more like dense way than your own pressure, awareness, or energy. And I think what you're saying, Teresa, to fit it into my existing conception of it, is not necessarily that it's not still louder than your own when you're in presence with it, but that you have an ability now to stay detached from it.
Yep.
It's mindfulness, right? It's just, it's mindfulness. That's all it is. The way that I've been, I don't think this is original at all, but this is the way I've been thinking and talking about openness and definition lately, is like our defined centers are, let me flip it, our undefined centers are the movie we're watching, and our defined centers are where we're watching the movie from, the seat that we're watching the movie from. And I'm thinking about amplification within that, and it feels like, when you're watching a movie, a real movie, you kind of want it to be amplified because it's the experience you're having. You don't want to be so preoccupied with what the neighbors are doing outside. You don't want to be so preoccupied with what your kids need from you. You want the movie to be amplified. And so even when we are deconditioned or deconditioning, even when we are anchored in our own frequency via strategy and authority, we still want to enjoy the movie, right? It's just a matter of not getting lost in the amplification.
Yeah, I think that's a great distinction. And that's why I love teasing out these concepts, because there is nuance there and words can be interpreted differently through different lenses. So yeah, I think that's a really good point.
And like, what did the idea of amplification mean to you when you first came into human design, and what does it mean 3 years in, and what will it mean 7 years in? Of course it's going to change.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with awareness, I noticed that with my undefined solar plexus, how I am around other people is vastly different than it was 3 years ago, as far as amplifying that. I'm able to like be the watcher of the movie and not like try to like jump on screen.
Yeah.
So it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, I'm thinking about my undefined ajna. It keeps coming. This is the center I'm clearly on right now. It was like sacral for 2 years, and now it's like there's space to think about this one now. And I'm thinking about two of the people who have had a lot of influence on me recently are my business alchemist coach, Nicole Beasy, who I think might have been in here a second ago, and Alakanan Diaz, my most recent human design teacher, both define ajnas. And when I'm learning from them, when I'm sitting with them, I can feel their awareness completely coming in. And it's not less loud, I don't think. And again, this is you bringing up this question, Therese, is like, this is the first time I'm kind of even asking myself the question, is it less amplified? So sometimes I'll say things and then 2 hours later be like, actually, yeah.
Emotional wave.
As of right now, I'm reflecting on recent interactions with both of them where I've been like very clear, like, ooh, this is your way of thinking about this, and I'm here for it right now. I'm eating it up. I'm in this movie, and I'm actually able to be more present in the movie because I know that I'm receiving their mental awareness, and I'm less likely to be triggered when aspects of me disagree with it. Because prior to human design and understanding this mechanic of like, I'm absorbing other people's mental awareness and conceptions and beliefs and ways of thinking, if something felt untrue according to something else I had lodged there, or felt untrue according to my emotional definition, I would want to be defensive about it. I would start to get into right or wrongness, right? And now I'm like, ooh, what an interesting movie. Let me like really take it in and get it all in. And then I can trust that in the aftermath, I will be able to filter the aspects of that work with my strategy, work with my authority. And in some ways, it's almost like the movie's louder now because I'm choosing to watch it, because I trust the experience and I trust that it's not going to just throw me off track of my own autonomy and discernment and knowing.
100%. With my undefined ajna, a lock fucks it up in a good way. It's like you're like locked in to watching this movie with him, but then I can totally see how it's his perception, his way of thinking. But it's just like it's captivating. So I think that's too something that you can kind of check in with people with it, like it's not to like judge if they have a healthy or unhealthy center, but you can really feel the frequency different of how they're expressing through that center. Even if they have no awareness of human design, it's not like they've actively done deconditioning or anything like that, but you can tune into a healthy ego, unhealthy ego, healthy ajna, unhealthy ajna, and it's really refreshing when you have those centers open. And I love how you're talking about the ajna, because I often don't think about that.
Yeah, when I first was introduced to the not self hierarchy and I saw how low the sacral was, I was like, what? And I would also, my only undefined centers are head, ajna, sacral, all pretty low on the hierarchy, but head and ajna above sacral. And I don't think I understood how it worked at first. I think I'm only starting to understand how the not self hierarchy actually works. But I was like, what? I don't have head and ajna conditioning. Like, it's all sacral. And recently, it's like I've cleared enough of the sacral that I'm like, oh, I think I've started to understand that why I was so conditioned in the sacral had a lot to do with mental pressure and the concept of should, which feels very undefined ajna condition.
Yeah. Well, and the ajna even being like, I know that it's my sacral that needs deconditioned.
I am that this is the problem.
Yeah, this is that, I did that too. I have one of the top contenders. I have the undefined solar plexus, but I was like, oh, my open head is definitely number one. It is not. It is nobody's number one. So it's like, unless that's your only center open, then that's your thing. But it's, because we kind of like avoid that. We're like, nah, that's going to be a little rough, deconditioning that based on the hierarchy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like this notion of like having it open up space, like when you kind of work through things in one center and then it opens up space for you to be aware of another center, because it's like with my ego, I mean, that's the number one in the hierarchy. And so it seems like that's been getting all of my attention in the last 3.5 years. But now that you bring it up, I have been noticing lately, like monitoring my head more. Like, is this actually interesting for me should I really be thinking about this? Like, is this correct for me to be putting energy into thinking about, and realizing how much my open head does just hijack me sometimes and just take me to all these places. And I'm like, my body doesn't actually have energy for this. What am I doing?
The way that I most recently learned the not self hierarchy was through a lock, and it was, you know, the way I first understood it was not necessarily because anyone taught me this, but just because I saw the list and thought I knew what a hierarchy meant, and decided that the way it worked was that it's the most ouchy at the top and the least ouchy at the bottom, which is why I was like about the sacral being 6 or whatever it was, you know, I was like, that's very ouchy, come on. But then the way that a lock described it, that made me understand. I'm assuming a lock is right. My undefined ajna. Maybe it's not. I don't know.
My ajna says a lock is always right. So,
but the way that he taught it was like, it's not necessarily. These are my words. It's not necessarily more ouchy at the top. It's more surface level at the bottom. So you see the conditioning at the bottom centers, and the root of it is higher. So that helped me understand why, for me, it was sacral first. It was sacral first, which at first I thought was just a type thing, you know, being in the 30%. But it's that too, sure. But it was like, it literally is what you just said, Teresa, where I had to clear the most surface level problem where I can't even examine my fucking thoughts because I'm running around like a crazy person drunk on sacral energy all the time and have not stopped in 10 years. You know, so let me learn to stop, you know, let me learn to like get in my fucking body and stop for a second. And then there will be some spaciousness for the next layer. So it was very interesting to me that it happened that way so clearly. And is ajna, but I can't remember if head or ajna is first.
ajna, or head is number 1. Ajna. Not number 1.
Yeah. Okay.
No.
Like
Other
Number 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to head yet. Like I don't even really think about mental pressure conditioning at all yet. So guess I'm going in reverse order then, right?
Yeah.
I'm on the now, creating some space to notice mental pressure.
Yeah, I like that perspective. I feel like for me, it has been the ego has been the first one, but the ego feels like it has more layers than my head. It feels like it's just going to keep going deeper and deeper, and you know, and it seems like in this lifetime that's a big thing for me too, because I'm completely surrounded by defined egos. I'm the only one in my family, like almost including my extended family that has an open ego. So there's been a lot of attention on that for me, but you know, the head is peeking in now, wanting to be seen.
I wonder too, if we look at like, just with the way that you take in information being consecutive, if you really have a focus on one center, because what I am catching myself doing, I'm like, oh, I kind of float between the 3, you know, solar plexus makes its appearance and then kind of moves, and head always, you know, but you being consecutive, it's like, now I'm on the ajna. Now I'm diving into the ajna.
That would make a lot of sense. I feel like.
That makes a ton of sense. And it also translates to so much of how I've taken in human design in general. You know, like even in this conversation multiple times, I've been like, this is the thing I'm on now. Before it was this, you know, it's like I go hard on one thing at a time.
Yeah. How is that being consecutive? And I mean, I guess human design and astrology are so intertwined, but I feel like last time you and I talked, you were kind of looking at them as like very different systems almost. And I don't know if that has shifted for you as you move through your emotional wave, but like blending them and incorporating them, do you feel like you want to separate them a little bit more, or I might be butchering this question.
No, it's a rich question. And like, I think probably what you're referring to, something else I said in that conversation, I think was, because I've been saying this for a while, I don't know if as I become more human design literate, if I'm going to kind of step away from astrology to an extent. I think at first I thought that was going to happen, and I was really sad about it. And then our teacher, John, I asked him, like, I was like, are there examples of human design people that still use astrology? Because I don't want to say goodbye. And he was like, I use it, you know, and a lot of that was good. That was nice for me. Yeah, also undefined, you know, like all of it, like put it all in there, mix it up. But, I still don't quite know. It's interesting. I go through phases where, because I am so in the process of attuning to my design right now and figuring out what the fuck is a manifester, like what the fuck is informing, what the fuck is not being in response. That's a big part of my process right now. Like, I have a funny story. We can maybe come back to that about attuning to not being in response being a huge part of what I'm in process with at the moment. But it's like, to me, I think I have a self-awareness that I can get rigid about stuff. And I've started to fear, am I being rigid in my human design experiment? Because do I even know what informing is only 2-ish, 3 years in? Do I really know what that feels like? You know, do I really know what the correct way for me to move through the world as a non-sacral being who still will be in response with people to some extent, but I trust that there's a way for me to do that that can feel correct, and I don't know it yet. And in the process of learning it, I definitely swing really hard, to the point where the funny story I was referencing was I flipped out because I couldn't handle my partner's alarm clock in the morning, because I was like, I'm starting every day in response to that alarm clock, and I like lost it. And I don't even know what he did. He somehow fixed it, and like life has been way better, but he still uses an alarm. Anyways, how does this connect to what you asked me about astrology? I feel like understanding where I am in my life based on my transits and these energetic components to my consciousness that I already have been attuning to for 7 years in the way that astrology has shown me them. It's like they're parts of my movie that are helping me in my process of attuning back to myself via human design. So it's like the way we take in strategy and authority and the idea of conditioning at first is all based on our conditioned perceptions. And so it's very easy to become very rigid. And I know that I do that. I know that about myself because of what astrology taught me, and because I've already been in this 7-year-long process of understanding myself through that cosmic language. So I don't know. I think a moment where I felt pretty clear that astrology is a very significant part of my perception and will likely remain it was when I was having this conversation with Alok, and his defined ashra was very like, no, put astrology down. And I was like, you know, I disagreed, like back and forth a little bit. And then I was like, you go ahead with your defined ajna. I know what astrology is to me. And I know that I have found and continue to find ways to use astrology that fit within the anchor of human design. And oh my goodness, human design has completely transformed my astrology awareness as well. Like the way that I understand a natal chart and transits is so different than how I did 3 years ago prior to human design. So it's like one is impacting the other, but I do feel design being sort of like the coming in as this foundation that I did know I was missing. And not to say that all astrologers are missing this by any degree, but I knew before I found human design, I knew that there was something missing from the way I worked with astrology and from the way I used astrology with clients. Because it was like, here's all this info about you. Now you feel affirmed that this is you, but what to do with that, you know? And like as an Aries, triple Aries, double Sag, it was like, okay, so I'm really fiery. I'm really oriented to self. Am I supposed to try to compensate for that? You know, that was always this lingering question. Should I try to be less that? Should I try to temper that? You know, enter human design, like very clearly stating No. And haven't you tried? And doesn't it not work? You know? So for me, there is this like synthesis happening, and I'm sure it will continue to change. But I think astrology totally primed my brain and my awareness to be able to work with human design. And human design in turn has changed my orientation to astrology. And at this point in time, it's very natural for me to use both. But I am very much consecutive determination wise, like on human design right now. And astrology, for the most part, is filler, part of my movie. Yeah, I don't know. Long ass answer to a simple question.
No, I love it. I feel like it
Yeah.
was a layered question, and
Yeah.
and with the defined emotional center, you're always going to be looking at all of the angles. So I really appreciate that. It's I've had a similar experience just in my own way, not with astrology, but with other modalities. Just we're just talking about other modalities in general and incorporating them with human design, having human design be a very foundational space that I live in, and then incorporating these other modalities. That at one point I was like, I'm only doing human design. That's my thing now. And then moving through my process and realizing that's impossible for me to just do one thing. It's never going to be my truth. And the more I push back against that, the more frustrated I get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and all the other things, they color experience. Conditioning's not bad. The not self's not bad. Losing yourself for an hour or a week to have an experience, it's not bad if you know how to come back, you know. And so yeah, I don't know, I just really feel icky about kind of demonizing any one way of utilizing these things, or on the other end, I guess, holding up and pedestalizing any one approach to it. Like my strategy and authority up until this point, my authority, like, strategy doesn't really work for me the way it works for most people, but my authority up to this point has made it very clear that utilizing all the things I know in a way that supports my emotional awareness and my emotional clarity is it.
You know, kind of speaking on emotional authority, I'm sure there are some emotional manifestors here that are curious maybe how you experience initiating and having to ride an emotional wave before you can make an initiation necessarily.
Yeah. You know, I have hardly initiated like big stuff since I've been in my experiment. Like one significant collaborative project. And even as I was initiating that, it was my experiment, and I knew that I was not following my authority fully. And so since then, in terms of like work and career and creative pursuits and teaching, almost everything I've initiated has kind of been just following the old sort of macro approach of mine, which isn't to say they've been initiated incorrectly, but like there hasn't been a shift, which is like what I'm here for, right? I'm here for new initiations, and I haven't really done any, like I'm always picturing it like there's the macro urge and initiation, and then there's little ones in between. I haven't had a new macro really since I've been in my experiment, and I've struggled a lot around trying to understand, am I waiting for emotional clarity? Am I waiting for a creative urge? Or am I in my head trying to be certain? Am I afraid of my impact and rejection and projection? And I still don't feel very clear on that. Like I'm still very much observing what's happening in my body. But my sense at the moment is I remember what it feels like to have no choice but to initiate a thing. And I just have not felt that in a long time. And so I'm trying to really just trust that I know what that feels like. And when something needs to come out of me, no one will be able to stop me, because I remember that feeling, and I know my ability to move the thing through once it's there, once it's gestated. And they're just on a big macro level, it's just not there yet. And it's confusing because that has exactly lined up with my human design experiment. So it's been very easy for me to look at that and be like, am I being rigid? Am I waiting for a certain certainty that's not coming? But I've seen this in a lot of different manifestors as well. And it supports what we know about the 7 years that we're in through human design. It supports what I know about looking at the transits right now, that something's coming. Where we are now, this isn't quite it. And even before human design or earlier in my human design experiment, I was doing a lot of teaching on the astrology of right now and why we kind of feel stuck in between different realities. So all of that has helped me just kind of trust and wait. Manifestor waiting is a huge thing that I feel like a lot of people don't realize, that we wait a fuck ton too, like a lot. We don't get to initiate, or we do, but like initiate. It's difficult for us to not initiate as well, to be disciplined about not initiating from the not self or need or fear, and actually waiting for an urge. So yeah, I don't think I'm at a point right now where I can speak really clearly to what's correctness in initiating for an emotional manifestor, because it's a part of my experience that I've not really gotten to have yet. Mm-hmm. I've been in a macro sense waiting well, this is the thing to come through, and I don't know exactly what that clarity feels like yet.
Well, too, you have channel of initiation, and what I see with that, with people that I've connected with, and the design of needing to be first, and it's like that way. It's like it's not obviously in the roots. It's not like a pulse, like you're waiting for the pulse, but it's like it almost like is waiting to birth something in your energy, and everything else is like lining up behind you to like initiate this new thing, or a group of people into this thing, and your mind has no idea when that is. And so that's also part of that waiting game. When I saw your chart and hearing you talk, I'm like, oh, that channel is like waiting to like something new,
right?
If
it's been done before, it's not it.
Right, exactly. And you don't know, and your mind doesn't know what it is, so it's probably like, what the fuck is it?
It's like it very much is like buffering is the because
mm-hmm.
I know things about it. I know things about what's going to come through next. I do. I know some of the needs it might fill. I know, like, I'm starting to know some of the who is a part of it. I know a lot about what it's not, but it's like, I just have to trust that I'll know when I know, I'll just have to trust that the thing, the metaphor of like a pregnant body is so,
that's, the
urge, right? And I don't know what part of this is the urge, create, rest cycle versus the wave, because I experience both, and they got to be connected, right? Because part of the manifestor urge is based on our motor centers. So for an emotional manifestor, the wave is a part of the fuel that's providing the urge. But when it's got to come out, you could pregnancy or a shit, right? When it's got to come out, it's going to come out. Like, I don't have to make it happen per se.
Right.
Yeah, I just haven't taken a shit in a long time.
Well, and your innocence motivation. So it's like, what if it's like, here's this really intense, fiery, let's do this. Oh, hey, chill there and wonder.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. It's such a fucking trip, the innocence motivation and the desire transference. Like, is there an outcome you want from this?
and your power view. So, I mean, I'm just like, oh, the irony of all of that together.
So much contradiction.
The cosmic joke. Everybody has their cosmic joke.
Yeah, we all have them in our charts. It's funny. So, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, you and I are flipped, because I'm desire, motivation, and personal view, and that dichotomy between the 3 and the 6 is really fascinating, because it's like my view, I'm seeing my own process and in my own bubble, and there's that aloofness to it. But then there's this like potent, you know, agenda kind of filled part of me that, yeah, it's weird to witness at times.
It's like this is part of the deconditioning is a spiral piece, because it's like, what does desire and innocence mean to you when you first hear it? And or power and personal view, and then it becomes these like friends that hang out and watch your perception and watch your movie and sort of gather information and experience until it can become this like cellular lived thing. And, you know, I really hope that one day I'll be able to like understand and articulate innocence, inform, emotional wave, urge, you know, like be able to deconstruct, like, this is how it happened. But definitely can't do that yet. You know, I'm definitely just like observing, and kind of, I feel like the word magnet keeps coming up, where I've got like my innocence magnet, my create rest magnet, my emotional wave magnet, my not being in response magnet. And it's just like all these different experiences are coming in and like being drawn towards that part of the witness to contextualize and help me understand what is like, how does this body, how does this form actually want to move through the world. Also, something that's been really useful for me recently was in a session I had with a lock. I was kind of processing some of this, and how looking at my design and like seeing the power in that and seeing the fuel. Like, I'm a powered up manifestor. I have all 3 non-sacral motors. They all go to my throat. I was realizing I had started to turn it into this pressure. Like, why aren't you creating huge things now? You know, like, why aren't you changing the world? And 2 things that he pointed out that are like obvious, but were really a balm for me were, 1, Uranus opposition hasn't happened yet, right? In astrology, we put such a huge emphasis on the Saturn return, and we do in human design as well. But it's really like, my experience of the Saturn return has been like, now you start your life from the vantage point of you. Now you've seen it all from Saturn's perspective. Now you've been conditioned by consensus reality. Now you get a chance to step back into that reality and figure out who you actually are, what your form actually is, and move through the world in that way. But the way Alok phrased the Uranus opposition thing was like something like, until your Uranus opposition, you're trying to find your place in a world that's not yours yet. He said something like that, and that felt very true. And then also he was like, you're only a few years into the 7 years. And that was also, of course I know that, of course, like, but the patience around that, like, understand, even like the fact that anything I initiate, even if I hope to God I come to clarity and something moves through me before I hit the 7-year mark. But even the awareness that anything I initiate within these 7 years is still going to carry the frequency of some, maybe a little too hard, frequency of some distortion, but more just like won't be quite it won't be quite correct. And wow, like, that's terrifying, but also at the same time relieves a lot of pressure, because it's just play up until then. You know, that's something else Alok said that was really supportive in that moment, was like, and you don't want to miss a second of what happens up at that point either, because it is the movie, it's the deconditioning process.
I love the reminder of this. Amy Lee gave a talk about this at the conference last year that's on YouTube. Like, if anybody's curious about life cycles and Uranus opposition and Saturn return. And my biggest takeaway from that talk is like, we're all just a bunch of big kids until 42. So be really, be compassionate with yourself, because you're basically still a teenager that's expected to operate as this adult that has it all figured out just because of society's expectations. But that's not truly the reality, and especially I feel like it probably feels different for everybody depending on where they are within their life cycle, but we are still going to go through that 7-year process. And there was a question about it, so I'm glad this came up organically. This is the only question so far we've had, but I've heard and read that deconditioning is a 7-year process. Is this arbitrary or based on human design theory?
It's the 7. It's the cellular. So human design is a cellular transformation, and we have like cellular turnover every 7 years. So all our cells are carrying a frequency. I'm not reading this from a human design book. This is just what's pulling up my receptivity. So that's why you might see people that are like, oh yeah, I deconditioned from human design in 3 years. It's like cellularly you didn't. It's like on the forefront of the books, human design, cellular transformation. It's like your mind is just telling you that you already have.
Yeah.
And it is based in human design in that it is, maybe not based in is not the right word, but aligned with astrological principle, because 7 years is a Saturn square.
Mm-hmm.
And at 7 years old, we know things about the child's body that happens at that point. I'm in my Saturn square of my astrology practice right now. I just wrote something about this morning and shared it on Twitter about how I can feel astrology in my bones now. It's not to say that it's never a mental process, but like I can move into any client situation, any teaching situation, and just know that whatever happens, I'm going to be able to understand it through the language of astrology, because astrology has become my lens now. It is in my cells. It is in my bones. And I feel that shit. I felt it starting to happen when the sign-based square of Saturn to where Saturn was when I started practicing astrology came. I feel it. I can feel Saturn's influence being like concrete, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So part of me did have a little bit of a reaction going into human design, because so much of the basics that I learned about being a manifestor were similar to a lot of what I've learned about myself through astrology, and similar to things I've known about myself, because we do have our form from birth, right? So like we are this design. We do know things about it. We can trust our experience up to this point. So I did have this feeling like 7 years, I don't know. That was, whatever. Now I see like so much transformation has already happened, and I'm grateful that I have the exact 7-year astrology background, because it really it feels like proof to me. I already have experience of a life shifting, perspective shifting, worldview shifting framework getting into my bones, that I'm able to be like, wow, I can only imagine what this form is going to move through the world like with 7 years of this additional, more concrete, more absolute attunement framework / deconditioning process that is human design.
So are you one of us? I say us as in those of us who hit our 7 years either right before or right on 2027?
I think so. I time figuring out when my like human design start date is, but yes, I would say probably like at some point in 2019 or 2020 is when I got into it, but much more into it in 2020. So
yeah. A lot of us in 2020 did that happen too, because there's this period where you like pull up your chart and then you're like, no, and then you like, or it's too much stuff, or everybody has their stories about like waiting a little bit. So I don't know if you count that, or if you count when you get serious.
When does the cellular level transformation start is another fun question to ponder, because I, to some extent, would say it starts the moment you see your body graph, even if you don't fucking know what it means,
Yeah. I felt something when I saw my body graph. It was like this thing inside of me that was like, this is something. And then I was like afraid of it, kind of, because it almost, my mind wants to tell me that it was because I knew it was going to transform stuff. So I think I shelved it for a little bit because I had a lot going on in my life.
Yeah,
but I felt
that's
something.
A good point. Yeah, that's a good point, because I remember for me it was like I felt something immediately. I literally was like, not in my emotional wave, clearly, add to cart every single book I could find, like right when I saw the chart. Very impulsive. But yeah, there was definitely a period of just, and I'm still in that, a lot of mind, just analyzing, conceptualizing, it's there. I don't know that ever, I'm sure it shifts at some point, I'm sure. But for me, my mind is still a huge part of this. It's a mental system,
Yeah. That's why I feel very like here for the ride, like I want to honor and express reverence for all that I've gotten already from the system, and also honor my ability to fifth line it and impact people early. I'm grateful that I had that experience with astrology first, because I could look back and go, astrology, I had a very different relationship to astrology 2 or 3 years in than I have now, but I don't think I did any harm in sharing what I knew as I was learning it. You know, like I have this fifth line, second line ability to synthesize and broadcast, and I think I've always done, probably even more so now that I understand the mechanics of the undefined ajna, but I think I've always done a pretty good job of like being honest about what I know and don't know and sharing from my perspective. So yeah, for me, it's like, it's fun and it feels really good and true to be able to honor the impact the system has already had on my life, and that I've already been able to have on other people through sharing it, while also holding a lot of reverence for the 3, 4, or 4, 5 years ahead of me in what's left in my initial deconditioning. And that's why it's a spiral, you know, it's like I've already heard everything I'm going to need to hear, right? I've already learned everything I need to learn from a mental level for a really significant deconditioning process.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a core part of it, is being able to perceive it from the mind, to be able to take in the information and learn it, because it creates that first imprint that then allows for the transformation. But I'm choosing in this moment to be really excited about the rest of it too. You know, like if I'm already this much more in trust with my body and my experience, like, dope. There's going to be more. Awesome. Can't wait.
Yeah, and I think remembering, you know, it's not a race. I think a lot of people, when they hear the 7-year process, they get discouraged because maybe they're comparing themselves to other people in their process. And it's like, I love that whole thing that you mentioned about not missing anything. Like, this is your movie, and it doesn't matter where other people are in their process. It's each and every day is, at least for me, like as an emotional being, I want to savor each day, each experience that I have. And it's not about an end point. It's your first 7-year cycle, and then you're going to go through, you know, hopefully if you live a long life, you're going to go through multiple 7-year cycles, and each cycle is going to be very different, you know?
Yeah. Any need to try to do it faster, or to identify with either the progress you've made or the progress ahead that you've yet to make, that's all the not self.
Mm-hmm.
The self is baby. It's all good. What are you experiencing?
Yeah.
So one thing that you messaged us about talking about, which I would love to hear the manifestor perspective on, is the Venn diagram of MGs and manifestors.
This is one of those things that I'm like, are you ready for me to bring some air?
We're ready.
But I might not actually be heretical at all. I just am used to provoking people no matter what I say. So okay. In what we might call the like traditional source lineage, we love to clarify that manifesting generators are generators. Fully agree. And I see that that is a reaction to perhaps another sort of sect or school of human design making a distinction. And in that it is a reaction, it becomes a distortion. This is the first time it's coming out of my mouth this way. But
you're so taste cognition. I just see it like, I just love watching people's I love it. Sorry.
No, I love that.
I'm an MG. I interrupt.
I love it. I love the observation. I think you were the first person to point out noticing my taste cognition too, Brandon. But yeah, I think that like sometimes that reaction to clarifying what we perceive as a mistake or a problem actually does do a disservice in like acknowledging, but also allowing for conversation and learning around what is the shared experience of having a motorized throat that is a significant aspect of both mine and your designs, right? And a lot of the people I've become close to, like new people I've become close to since starting my experiment, are very disproportionately man gens. Prior to my experiment, most of my close friends were projectors. Almost every single one of my like new close connections is a manifesting generator. And like recently I realized a part of this, I think, must have been for me to become very clear on the differences so that I could understand that I don't just have generator conditioning, I have manifesting generator conditioning. And I've been trying to keep up with man gens and move through the world like a man gen. So like it's been very helpful for me to have these examples of like super amazing manifesting generators that we love to motor throat together, and we love to shift energy together, and we love to initiate and then be like, oh, okay, you're still going? Okay, wow. You know, be able to understand like that. It's not that though. There's a lot that's alike, but it's not that. And it's usually the other way around because more people are man gens than manifestors. And I just feel like we need to, I would like to see people stop. I'm trying to see my fifth line is like, phrase it carefully to resist projection.
Just say it.
I would love to see less of like calling out manifesting generators for wanting to know what they have in common with manifestors, and more just thoughtful discussion around it, right? I think personally, I very much do believe and teach it as 4 types, because I think when we start to think about the manifesting generator as like a hybrid, that puts us in the mind, because now we're thinking about what do we have in common between the 2 types? Are they their own thing? Are they their not? And when we think about the manifesting generator as a subtype of the generator open and enveloping aura in response, that puts us in the body because it orients everything around sacral response, which is really important for manifesting generators. But I think to like brashly like shut down convo about it is doing a disservice to manifesting generators understanding their nature, because you do not respond exactly the same way all the time as a pure generator. And you do have this, like, we need to acknowledge the ability that your body and your form has to bring things out and create them. And that can happen in response, right? And I think if we're like so on, like, it's response, it's not initiation, then we lose the ability, we lose the potential to actually look at the nuance of it and understand mechanically what's really happening for manifesting generators. And in terms of like my current perception of a similarity on a mechanical level, kind of what I see is like, I was just looking for my phone to pull up something I wrote, but I'm looking at it with you all. I had a feeling that I posted something a while back that was just a note from my phone that was like, what are the each types contributing to reality? And I sort of saw, I don't know if I'll remember all of them, but I kind of saw like pure generators as reality carriers, manifestors as reality creators. Like we do not carry the life and the reality around in our bodies. We go into a void and then we come out and we go this direction. And generators are carrying that reality everywhere they go. And manifesting generators, according to this framework I made on a note in my phone, are carrying it, but also curating it. That's how I was thinking. Manifestors are reality creators. Generators, including man-gens, are reality carriers, but manifesting generators are also reality curators. And it's like you're carrying it around, but you're also able to go over here and be like, move this, change this a little bit, beep, 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 beep. You know? And it is
boom. I fucking love that.
Cool. I'm glad you love it. I forgot what I said for projectors, and I think I might have said reality clarifiers for projectors.
I like that too.
Reflectors, I just started trying to make them start with C's because that's what started happening. And I think reflectors said like reality checkers, I think is what I said, but I have since come up with better ones in the comments that I can't remember. But anyways, yeah, what do you all think? I feel like there is like a experience. This motorized throat is a thing. This feeling of there's energy in me that has to get out and nothing can stop it. I also see man-gens as being very impactful. Maybe not in the aura way, right? Or definitely not in the aura way, but the fact that you can take energy from inside of you and bring it out and you don't need anyone else to do that. Like your words carry fuel, they carry impact. A lot of the manifesting generators that I know are very influential. You see them speak something and you see that things are changed because they. So I do think there is quite a bit that we have in common. And I think both manifestors and manifesting generators could benefit a lot from talking about what we have in common instead of always talking about what we don't have in common, because it clarifies, it helps to clarify the difference on both of our ends, which is useful.
Yeah, 100%. As you're talking, I'm just like, I'm glad we're having this conversation, because it's like sometimes it feels like it diminishes our not existence, but like our differences, our uniqueness in our charts as MGs. And I'm actually like half and half, legitimately on my body graph. I'm half manifestor, half generator, you know? And a lot of when I'm like initiating something is from a place of response. And I just had this happen with my staff at my brick and mortar business yesterday. We had a meeting and I was getting ready to leave and they said something and we started having this little conversation, and in response I was like, let's go to the whiteboard, and all of a sudden all this shit came out of me, and they looked at me and they're like, that was in there the whole time? I was like, apparently I just needed something to respond to. You know, I wasn't just going to bring that out of thin air, because I know what happens. And it wasn't even in my mind to bring out of thin air. I'm so working in response that way. I definitely feel a difference. And I can also look back at my life when I was walking around as an ego manifestor with my 4521 split off from my sacral, and things were not as awesome. And speaking of the aura too, it's like we have that warm, fuzzy aura. So we can initiate things and it doesn't feel as, you know, I have 39 conscious sun, I have 39 twice, she's 3955. So there's still a little bit of provocation there, but it's a little bit warmer and fuzzier than the manifestor aura. So there are definite differences. And I'm just like, my body's like, we get to talk about this. I'm so excited.
I mean, yeah, we talk about this a lot, Brandy, and I feel like every time we talk about it, I'm at a different place in my wave with it. So it's kind of funny looking back on my experience with it, because when I first came to human design, you know, I think Shaitan Parkin's book was one of the first books I read, and he very clearly puts it as like almost a fifth type. And so for the longest time, I thought, oh, there are 5 types, and I'm a manifesting generator. I'm a hybrid type, however he phrases it. And then it was like I started taking my foundational courses, and it's like, no, there are 4 types. You have a generator aura, and da-da-da. And I was like, oh, okay, there are 4 types. I am a generator. And it's like, it's just really interesting watching it. But, you know, Brandy and I work primarily with sacral beings. And so when we've done these coaching containers with generators and manifesting generators, the difference is palpable.
Absolutely.
You know, you really can feel it. And when everybody in the container is a sacral being, but there are these very clear differences, and it's kind of all laid out in front of you to feel and to see and to hear, it really just solidifies it. So I think it's just coming back to our experiences, and like you were saying, Kelsey, just sharing our experiences, seeing what we have in common, seeing what we have different. And I'm, you know, my husband's a manifesting generator, and our friend Sarah lived with us for a year, and she's a pure generator. And so that was really cool too. It was almost like being in this immersive experience, seeing how Thomas and I function very differently than she does, and seeing what our strengths are within that, you know?
Absolutely. And with, I have so much on this topic, but with, lost it, splenic gone.
Well, and also there is a raw quote very specifically, and he says it in the generator signature lecture, and he also says it in some PDF that I've read somewhere. And he says manifesting generators are a very different being. Like it's very different.
I got it back. Sorry, I just remembered. Manifesting generators not being afraid to initiate in response, or like to work from that place of response, but really understanding what it means to be in response. I feel like it took me a while in my process of getting comfortable and surrendering to the trust fall that is strategy and authority. And then from there, I can really differentiate between, you know, working from a space of response and not.
Yeah. And I can understand why analysts or whoever can get kind of salty about making that distinction, because when manifesting generators come to you, if it's your foundation session or whatever, and this is something I've experienced on both ends, we are much more likely to be conditioned to behave like manifestors. So there almost needs to be this
100%.
swing of the pendulum to be like, no, you have an aura that is designed to work in response. So I understand, like, on both sides of it. I get it. I get why there's a lot of talk around really making sure that we do understand we still have a generator aura.
Well, do you remember when we were all in class and Amy was like, they were going through everybody's chart at the beginning, and Amy's like, this is Brandy. She's a manifester and a generator. Like, she didn't call me a manifesting generator. And I was like, I'm working on, she was just looking at my body graph, but I was like, just pointing out my biggest deconditioning piece right there.
Yeah. No, I think that's what's been going through my head these last, well, it's like, it's well intentioned, because it's easy for a manifesting generator to, right? Like, oh, this narrative, I fucking hate it. I have a lot of resentment for it. I hope one day to be able to observe this with neutrality, but I'm not there. He wants to be a manifester. Like, you don't fucking know. You don't know life on the other side of this aura. I love it, and it's not at all what you think. It's a grass is greener situation. That's a whole other talk. But I see the truth of that, and I think it's easy for manifesting generators to utilize the mental awareness that they have the motorized throat, they have the initiating capacity to continue to keep them away from deconditioning and from response mode and from their sacral energy. And so I see why people like kind of overcompensate for you're a generator, but at the same time, we have to trust people to be able to move through their own experience, and denying them the truth of their motorized throat doesn't serve anyone.
Yeah, there's no denying it. We love to talk.
And like, it's like course correcting, changing things, right?
Right. It's like, are you going to pendulum swing from one version of conditioning to another, or are you going to come home to your one subjective experience of truth, right? Also, just like, I fucking love talking to manifesting generators as well, because a motor throat can keep up with a motor throat. For someone where I am in my process of deconditioning, where I'm like really wanting to protect myself from projections, and I'm very aware that I don't have a warm, fuzzy, open aura. Like, I move into every social interaction with an awareness of how, to bring it full circle, intense I am, right? And there really is such a lovely, it's like a breath of fresh air. It's like a little relief to get to talk to either another manifestor or a manifesting generator, because you will interrupt me. You will curate this experience, you will poke around. We will motor throat together, You all haven't interrupted me much, but you would if you wanted.
Yeah. We are a little bit more aware of it on here, but like when it's her and I back and forth, it's just nonstop.
Constant interruptions.
Like, oh, what are you going to say? And then we both are splenic. So it's like, oh, where'd it go? No, because we want to like interrupt to get it out because it's coming in quick, and then it goes.
Goes away.
Like a text audio message thread between two motor throats.
Oh, it's podcasting back and forth to each other.
Yeah.
Especially fourth line externalizations.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I don't think I ever realized like other people don't talk the way that I do or feel as comfortable. And that's something I notice on Instagram when I'm communicating with somebody who I don't know very well. I'll say, hey, I hope you don't mind that I'm going to use a voice note feature. This is just way easier for me to communicate. You don't have to use it in return to my message, but this is how I communicate. So
the fifth line manifestor version of that is like, somebody is telling me a small thing. I'm like, here's a sermon. Okay, bye. Like, I just wanted
all the informing.
To deliver the entire download, and I'm out. See ya.
Yeah. I feel like this is something I've heard from other manifestors. I don't know if this has been your experience, Kelsey, but the extent to which you have to inform is always underestimated. Kind of when you first get into the experiment, it's like, oh no, I really have to inform bullet point everything versus just a big thing maybe.
I am just starting to figure out informing. I feel like I had this moment like maybe 3 weeks ago where I was like, strategy and authority. Strategy and authority. I was just like, I've been all about emotional authority. When I talk to other types, we spend a lot of time kind of massaging in the mechanics of response and massaging in the mechanics of invitation or the mechanics of waiting a lunar cycle, so that they can like, I'm like, live it and breathe it. It's your life. And then I'm like, I am not doing that. I'm not using my strategy as a way of moving through the world, which it is a different experience for manifestors, right? A lot calls informing an artificial strategy. Our strategy is there for the purpose of relationship. It's not really there, and some people have different kind of takes on this that I'm open to, but it's not there in the same way that the other strategies are as an actual way of moment to moment moving through the world. Like, I spend my day alone at home. My partner's a generator and a full-time teacher. So I'm like, I don't have a response to guide me through my day, you know, like, and I don't have invitation to guide me through my career, and informing doesn't clarify for me urges. You know what I mean? Like, it's all just there for lessening resistance / making relationship feel better, mostly for the other, you know? So I feel like I'm just starting to kind of figure out what informing is, but definitely what you said resonates in that you don't see the behind this closed aura. You don't see the point of informing because I don't care what you're doing, you know? Like, I know a lot of times we talk about neutrally inform your manifestors, and I agree with that. But again, it's relational. It's so that we can normalize informing, and it's so that manifestors don't have to feel like we're in response mode. Other people informing us helps us to get comfortable informing ourselves and helps us to be able to initiate rather than respond, right? But if we leave like relationality out of it, I don't give a fuck what you're doing. I don't need you to inform me that you're going to walk downstairs or what you're, you know what I mean? Like, it's so inorganic in a way to really adopt it as like a part of your ongoing process. And I certainly don't feel like I've hacked inform at all yet. I feel like I'm baby informing, but I also don't resonate with the idea that manifestors hate informing. I could see myself coming to that, but as of right now, I like to use my motorized throat. I like to talk about myself. I don't really have any issue informing. It's more just like confusing to me that it's so needed, but understanding the mechanics of the closed aura most definitely have helped me understand that. And I see it too as like, this is all really like basic stuff, but I don't even know. Yeah, I don't know that I have anything else.
Yeah.
I'm currently hacking informing, so check back.
One difference I noticed with manifesting generators and generators as far as like informing, and like, it's like I was afraid to inform, so I was under informing, and that was like making others around me, when you switch, you know, pivot quickly, it was not making people comfortable. So one thing as a manifesting generator, and any MGs watching, for me, what's really worked is when I'm informing, like almost over informing or over explaining things for clarity, it just makes it smoother around you. Then you can like remain the eye of the hurricane instead of being the hurricane itself.
Yes.
You know?
I've thought about that in astrology, I've got a South Node in Virgo, which is like really good at breaking things down really clearly. And one thing I realized is that I do that already. Like, I've always been like, if I'm going to delegate something or initiate something or manage a project or a group of people, I've done a lot in the past, I'm very good at giving you very thorough directions, which is informing, right? And then I realized since human design that I know that this is what I was doing, but part of what I was doing was trying to minimize having to respond once I put the thing out. Like, it's, here's a really long email with everything, please don't bother me, right? Like, so it's like I've built up this, and the South Node is like you do it too much to an extent. Like it can become a pattern. So it's like I'm over obsessed sometimes with making sure I get all the details right. But I realize that's been kind of a reaction to and a protection from having to show up as though I'm a sacral being and be available for the back and forth. Like, I'm not available, so please get it right now.
That's so funny because mine, I'll send like a detailed email with everything in it. And then at the bottom, I'm like, please let me know what comes up for you. Please email me with any questions that you like. I'm like inviting the response back because I'm like, I just want to make sure I'm here for it. I'm here for the exchange.
Same. My emails still say that at the bottom. Or I guess more recently I realized that my emails say that, but that my body is yelling, do not reply unless it's an emergency, you know? So that's a very recent thing that I've shifted, is removing those colloquialisms of reach out anytime. Let me know if you have any questions, you know? It is kind of scary though. It's like,
feels weird hearing you say that.
I know.
If you have any questions, like I have no questions for you.
Got it.
I have a lot of fear around that still, because in the human design space, you all either understand or you have some level of investment in understanding that this is not personal. I'm not an asshole. It just hurts my body to check my email. Like, that sounds so absurd to people who don't understand it. And also, everybody's inundated with communication, so people think they can relate to you. You can't, you know? And so it's very comforting to be able to play with these mechanics and informing and like honoring the truth of that I'm going to say something to you and I don't really want you to say anything back. I'm very grateful for containers where we can play with that without judgment, but outside of the human design space, you know, so it is, for right now, I've simply removed those colloquialisms from the email, but I hope that at some point I have the balls to be more clear about informing that even in non-human design spaces, but it is scary, especially with the fifth line.
Yeah. I mean, I've noticed myself as a 2/4 really trying to kind of bring these awarenesses to people, even outside of human design and even just like without explaining it in the human design sense. And I had this experience the other day. I pick up shifts at this restaurant like once a month or something because I'm friends with the owners and they just need help occasionally. And I ran into an old friend who was asking how to get in touch with one of the owners. One of them's a manifestor, one of them's a generator. And he's like, I keep reaching out to Matt and he's not responding to me. And I was like, have you tried reaching out to his wife who might get back to you easier? And I was like, Matt's just not really one to respond. And it was actually received really well. It was like the guy just got it and was like, you're right, good call, I'll try reaching out to her. You know? Right. So this is something that people can understand, because whether people realize it or not, they do feel energetics, you know, and they kind of feel that you're not available to that. The mind might bypass that awareness, of course, but there is an understanding of it without people really realizing it.
Yeah. It's such a nuanced thing, because like even with you all did inform me that you would be interested in having me on this, right? It's like I wanted to, but I don't know where are the lines with like, I'd like to be on your podcast. At this point, this version of me would never do that. You know what I mean? So and I don't know that I ever want to do that. There's probably a tasteful way to do it that I'm just not thinking of, but I don't know, like I don't want to completely eliminate the potential of collaborating with people when they're the one that reached out. You know what I mean? I don't want to get rigid like that. That doesn't feel right to me. I want to be able to experiment with this stuff and like talk about how did that feel with people. And I want to be initiated into things too. I don't want to be left out. That's something that sometimes scares me about getting involved with more human design people, is like, I can feel sometimes like you're never going to reach out to me. I don't like how that feels, you know? And at the same time, the same day that I freaked out about my partner's alarm clock going off, I also cried because 5 different people texted me to say hello that day. And I did not want to look at it. And I also didn't want the notifications on my phone, and it put me over a little edge, you know? So it's like all of this is true at the same time. But I think the baseline, the universality I always return to is we have to trust ourselves and each other to manage our experiences. And at least at this point in my process, I want that to include meaning that generators and projectors and reflectors in human design feel like it's okay for them to reach out to me, and feel like it's okay for them to invite me to things, and trust that I will not respond if it's not time to, or I will inform and initiate in a way that feels correct to me afterwards. You know, I don't want to come into a human design. I want to come into a human design community where people kind of honor and revere, in a way, the manifestor energy. And also, I want to come in where people trust their own autonomy and my own autonomy, and understand that it's not rigid, it's not black and white. We can communicate however we want in the moment. It's low stakes. Everybody is in command of how they do or don't operate within these containers we create.
Yeah. And I wonder if that also has to do with and this is kind of a topic probably for another time, but just touching on this, like you having all projected channels and having that element of like wanting recognition. Because I think all of us, it's like 75% of the chart is projected channels in general. And so, you know, all of us are kind of looking to be recognized for those attributes and features within our charts out in the world. And I feel like there's, you know, just like there's a distinction between MGs and generators, there's a distinction between manifestors that have manifested channels and projected channels.
And I also wonder too, my gate 48, I got a solution for everything, but like, could you inform from the very basic level, like on Instagram, I'm open for collaborations. Here's the kind of collaborations I'm looking for. Then you're giving the generators, you know, it's like you're giving people things to respond to,
Totally.
You know, and it kind of opens that up, instead of being like, oh, I hope that they reach out, but just like informing that you're open. And then you're like, I'm not open right now for this.
Yeah. And you know, something else I want to inform about right now is that every manifestor has their own experience of what feels good in relationship, and that will change as well. Like I already feel differently about this same exact topic than I did a year ago. I have informed on Instagram before that I want people to like reach out to me, and I've been more mindful and discerning about saying stuff like that lately, because I'm realizing how often I say it and I don't mean it, right?
It's the mind.
So that's like, I'm not doing that much informing around it right now, because at the moment I'm very, very aware of how automatic it is for me to say stuff like that, when the actuality is that I really want to be left alone right now, or I can feel something gestating inside of me and I don't have energy for anything except for resting while that gets ready, you know? But also it will change. I will go through ebbs and flows, right? And we're all very different. So I think like sometimes I feel sad when I see some of the ways that other manifestors will talk about this stuff, where it feels like there really is like a wall around don't ask me questions, which is one that to me doesn't resonate at all, or at least right now doesn't resonate, at least not as a general rule. Sure, there's questions that I'm like, we're done here. But for the most part, I fucking love talking to people. You know, I love the experiment. I love human design, and I love getting to know the humans in it. And so I think, yeah, that's the main thing I want to inform at the moment, is just like, you say this for every type, but no type is a monolith, but especially manifestors, like, get to know the individual manifestor and be invested in learning how they like to engage, because it's definitely not all the same. And I'm still learning to be discerning and open to response or collaboration in a way that does feel correct for me, which is why I am kind of behind a wall right now, trying to work that out. But yeah, I don't want to be left out. I want to be a part of things. We're humans behind these closed auras. You know, we're softy little sensitive people that, I'll speak for myself. Maybe not all manifestors feel that way, but I love people and I love connection and I love relationship. Like, so much of my astrology chart and so much of my body graph too are very relationally oriented. And yes, I have 6 individual channels, and yes, I'm single definition, and yes, I have a closed aura, but I still love relationship, and that is a true thing about me. And I just do relationship differently, but I still want to do it. I still want to do it. So like, give me a chance. I don't even know why I'm preaching about this right now, but
I think that's good for all of us to hear, you know, and that there's not one way to do relationships, but we're all relational creatures, you know.
yeah.
Mm. Well, I feel complete. How do y'all feel?
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks for motor
Yeah,
thrills.
this is super fun. I feel like this just flowed really well.
Oh, I was muted. I didn't even
Oh.
realize I was muted. And I just said I feel complete right before you did.
Oh.
I was like, I was agreeing with you because I thought I was talking with you. Anyways, Kelsey, do you want to inform us about working with clients, what you're up to in that arena, real quick before we hop off?
My website is a pretty terrible representation of my practice at the moment, because so much has been kind of shifting backstage and the clarity around what it needs to look like next hasn't arrived yet. But I do work with clients. I'm doing lesson client work as I decondition and realize my non-sacral fifth line self is not as available for persistent one-on-one. But at the moment, I have like a number of openings per month to patrons only. I might open that up wider. And then I'm starting to do, at the moment, it's 6-week long container one-on-one with a handful of people at a time that I'm calling the Attunement Incubator, which is attuning to self via human design, astrology, and the Akashic Records. So that's not, there's like a wait list on my site, but it's not sign upable yet. And I have like a human design class, fundamentals human design class on my website. I have a very thorough astrology class happening right now and is also self-paced. And I can feel that the direction I'm moving in is a lot of like video and podcast kind of content in a collaborative way. And there have been little things starting to happen, but practicing a lot of discipline right now and waiting for clarity and real urges. But I anticipate there will be a lot that is yet to be made manifest coming through around like videos and podcasts that are kind of mostly human design centered. So and you too will hear from me. That's anticipated as well.
Yay.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. It was awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for not being afraid to approach a manifestor.
Oh, we actually have another manifestor, another emotional manifestor next week. So
cool. I'll tune.
Yeah, it'll be good. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. And Kelsey will be tagged in the caption so you can check out her page, go over. Her posts are amazing. I mean, she's emotional. There's depth. It's awesome. It's wonderful. It's warm and cozy, even if her aura isn't.
Yeah, and this replay will be up on our YouTube channel, on the Being Sacral YouTube channel, because Instagram is just deciding to like randomly delete these. So
basically, if we talk about some like heretical shit, all of a sudden the Instagram IGTV is gone like a couple weeks later. So if you're scrolling on our feed and you don't see a video that you've been looking for, head on over to our YouTube channel and it's there.
Thanks.
All right. See you later.